You want to know what I bought? You want to see what I bought? You want to see what my tastes of buying books are? Well, you came to the right place, because let's talk about me buying some books. Hi, I'm Pete, and this is The Ponderings of Pete. Obviously, because you came here. I bought books. I bought a bunch of books. Most of the books that you're going to see today, I bought from Book Outlet, which is a nice website. A lot of cheap books. I think they're used, but it's fine. Honestly, the ones I've received have been in really good condition. Some of the ones I have bought here are from thrift stores, and some of them are also from Barnes & Noble. So a variety of different places. I think I've bought them all in the past month. So this isn't like a, hey, this is all the books that I bought since I started BookTube, because that'd be a lot. Too many. So the first one, I bought this at Barnes & Noble because I was waiting on something to happen, and obviously I went into a bookstore and bought books. It happens. The Magic of Recluse. I don't see this one talked about on BookTube that much. And this is like a 20-some book series, so it's pretty long. It actually might be a bunch of smaller series that are all just included in the world of Recluse. But this is the first one. So, and I see a lot of these in used bookstores as well. So I figured that if I really want to read this, I'm going to do some more research, dive into it, figure out if the fandom exists, because I haven't really heard of a fandom existing. Like it's definitely not as big as Wheel of Time. This is the first of the saga of Recluse. I don't know when I'll read this, but it's probably another interesting fantasy series. So young Laris must find his place in the world in Recluse, permanent exile, or the Danger Guild. There's a lot of interesting. Laris must use to learn his powers in an orderly way before his Wanderjaw or fall prey to chaos. Cool, that's Recluse. Next up is, I found this one in a gas station actually. There was like 2 or 3 books. I actually could only find one of them. I think I packed the other one away. This is book 2 in a series, so I kind of broke my rule, but it looks so interesting that I'm like, I'm going to go find the first book of the series, but I need to buy this book to make sure I remember. This series is about a magical wandering theater troupe. I know, right? I read the back of the book and I was like, I have to get this because a magical theater troupe with a wizard and everything. That sounds awesome. So it's called Elsewhens, book 2 of Glass Thorns. Melanie Rawn is the author. Check this out. If you read this, let me know how it was, because it seems like such an interesting concept. The next one is, this one is from Book Outlet. I was kind of browsing when they were having a sale, which they always are, which is dangerous. And I was like, this looks interesting. And that's actually a few of the books on this list are just like, oh, I've never heard of that book. Let's read it. It's called Mage Against the Machine. Such a great title. This is definitely a sci fantasy, more dystopian book. It takes place in the year 2120. Mages have retreated beneath domes, and our protagonist is obsessed with the 20th century. So, and then he, per dystopian novel things, he realizes the world is not as it seems. I would like to read this soon. Honestly, it sounds fun. It's mages in a dystopian world. So what's not to like? The next one, another interesting title that caught my eye. You can tell I like interesting title. Magician's Impossible by Brad Abraham. So this is like the combination of a Jason Bourne novel, sort of. Not really Jason Bourne. Protagonist discovers parents were magicians in our world, and now their shadowy figure organization is coming after him. Sounds interesting. And he has to master magic. This sounds like an interesting book. CIA, spies, magic. What's not to like? The next book, I think I bought this at Barnes & Noble a little bit ago. I'm just putting it in here because I have it and it was there. So this is a book series that's been touted to me by a lot of different people. That specifically Alan at the Library of Alexandria. He loves this series and talks about it whenever he can. Senlin Ascends by Josiah Bancroft. This, I've heard a lot about this. Like, there's the Tower of Babel in it, and it's not like the biblical Tower of Babel, but it's like a Tower of Babel with a lot of different sounds. It honestly sounds pretty anime, if I'm being honest. Our protagonist, Senlin, loses his wife, and he has to struggle to find her. I'm really interested in this. I've heard a lot of good things about this book. I don't know when I'm going to read it, though. I really want to. I thought about reading it for a buddy read last month, but I didn't have the time. Eventually, I really want to get to this. The next one is also by an author that I've been looking into reading more of. I haven't actually read anything by him, but that is The Tiger and the Wolf by Adrian Tchaikovsky. Yeah, I think that's how you pronounce it. He also wrote Children of Time, which is something I've heard really good things about, but I picked this up on Barnes & Noble because I was like, oh, I know that author. Let's buy it. This is a fantasy book, unlike, I think, Children of Time. Children of Time was a sci-fi book. But it's a fantasy book about were-people, like were-bears, were-tigers, werewolves. It's a society built around that, around like, I don't know what they called it. I read like the first chapter. It's not interesting. There's were-deer. I'm interested. That actually brings, but only the strong survive. So it's a very tribal culture within this fantasy world. I'll check this out at some point, but let me know if you read it, what you thought. Or any of these books, really. If you've read them, let me know what you thought. This next book, I've already read because I bought it and I read it. But that is The Firekeeper's Daughter. This was such a good book. Native American Nancy Drew. I loved this book. This is definitely top 5, top 10 books of the year for me. It's so far 100% top 5. Really insightful look at a Native American culture. The writing was great, very suspenseful. And of course, the mystery element did keep you guessing. And there's plenty of unlikable villain, which every mystery needs. Genuinely unlikable people. Check this out. Definitely, if you buy one book off this list, this is the one I would recommend you grab. So, going off the book outlet trend, we have Legion by Brandon Sanderson. I saw Brandon Sanderson, I'm like, I'm buying that. Because Brandon Sanderson is an auto-buy for me. The Many Lives of Stephen Leeds. So this one is this is a novella collection. So this is 3 novellas that he wrote about this guy, Stephen Leeds. I don't know if it's connected to the X-Men Legion person, but it's a guy with a lot of different personalities. I'm interested in seeing, I think he has multiple personalities. No, he has hallucinations, not personalities. I'm going to check this out at some point. Let me know if you've read it and what you thought about it. I'm interested. Next up is Timeless by R.A. Salvatore. I picked this up. I think this is one of the places you could start for The Legend of Drizzt, but I could definitely be wrong. I'm trying to get to a spot where I can start Drizzt, because Drizzt is, I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right, is an iconic figure in fantasy. And I want to read it. And I want to know more. I didn't read it when I was younger, so I am very interested in reading this. I think this is a starting point. I could be wrong. Let me know if I'm wrong, please. Next up, we have another auto-buy author for me, Ray Bradbury. I Sing the Body Electric. I don't need to, do I need to explain anything else? It's Ray Bradbury. He wrote Fahrenheit 451, Something Wicked This Way Comes, and others. What's the short story collection that I just read a couple months back? The Illustrated Man. I love Ray Bradbury's work, and I'm getting more into him, and this is another short story collection, which, you know, is what he's known for, I think. Or, in my opinion, what he's known for. Other than Fahrenheit 451. I'm going to check this out at some point and feed my growing short story need. Next up is Tim Powers' The Anubis Gate. This is a time travel sci-fi with an interesting sounding cast of characters, and it has a Philip K. Dick Award, which is interesting. So I'm checking this out because it looked interesting from the synopsis or the back cover blurb. So, interesting sci-fi. So next up we have All Are Wrong Todays by Ellen Masteri. And the vibe I got from this book was kind of like a sci-fi, I don't know. It felt like an interesting sci-fi twist on a John Green novel, if that makes any sense. there's time travel, where a heartbroken teen basically goes back and finds a terrible alternate reality. He gets a time travel machine and creates an alternate reality. It sounds fun. I'm going to check this out soon. Next up, we have The Bard's Blade. There are not enough books about bards, but funny enough, this bard is actually already engaged when we meet him. So this book is primarily about an engaged couple that get caught up in a dark prophecy in their fantasy world. Classic, people get caught up in a dark prophecy. Sounded interesting, so I grabbed it. Book outlet again. Let me know if you've read this. These next two are both short story collections. The first is Carbide Tipped Pens, edited by Ben Bova and Eric Choi. Ben Bova is big in the short story collection, sci-fi short story collection industry, evidently. One of them is by Ben Bova, of course. Howard Hendricks, Doug Beeson, Lou Zinn, Robert Reeve, Kate Story, Carl Frederick, Nancy Fuldum, Jack McDevitt. It's a short sci-fi short story collection, and Ben Bova typically does a pretty good job with curating these from the little that I've read of sci-fi short story collections. So, another one. Next one is Clockwork Fairytales. This has 3 different ones by names I have no idea who they are. J. Lake, Kat Richardson, K.W. Jeter, but they're based a lot on the Hans Christian Andersen's stories. But it was a short story collection that seemed kind of different, so I figured I'd pick it up. And then we have American Magic. This is another urban fantasy one, but in this one, essentially, there's a leaked document and now everybody can figure out how to do magic. So basically, magic has always existed in this world. The government's been hiding it, and we have a WikiLeaks situation, and now everybody knows. So let's go for it. Everybody's starting to do magic, which is cool. And this is a thriller novel. Probably like Jack Reacher meets American Gods. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. But another one that just the premise sounded interesting. So I picked it up. So these last few books are basically all, I think, nonfiction. I picked them up because I either saw them in a bookstore and I was specifically looking for something like that, or it just looks interesting. The first one is The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli. Machiavelli is a very famous philosopher that I've heard about. His philosophies are very controversial because there's no compassion in them at all that I can tell. Tactics for about absolute power and stuff like that. I'm interested in reading what they are and why they're so controversial. Because some of them specifically were mentioned in another book in relation to the Cold War. Because sometimes you have to sacrifice things. Kind of one of those interesting philosophy books that I thought I'd pick up. Next up is Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. This was a book translated from Latin. Marcus Aurelius is a Roman emperor, or was a Roman emperor. He is renowned as a philosopher king, and this specifically has actually been mentioned in a few sci-fi books that I've been reading. And I saw it in Barnes & Noble, and I was like, I want to read that, because I'm interested. So it's goes into a little bit of the background at the beginning, which I was reading. And he sounds like he had a very privileged life, but philosophy comes out of privilege, right? I don't know. That's an interesting essay question. So this is another philosophy book that I was like, let's dive into that. That sounds interesting. Next one you will already have seen in another video. The Cold War, A New History by John Lewis Gaddis. This is written by a professor out of... I don't know which... I'm not going to say because I don't know which... But he's a professor, and he was taught classes on the Cold War, and his students were like, why can't you make this shorter? So he did. And he put it in a book. This is not a college-level book. This is kind of a, hey, let's talk about the Cold War book. I'm using it to get a brief idea of what the Cold War is about, essentially, and gain a brief overview so I can go into more in-depth Cold War studies for a book I'm writing. Next one, similar thing. Found this in a used bookstore where I was specifically looking for Cold War stuff. The Power and Purpose After the Cold War. This was written by Zaki Laidi. I think it was originally translated or written in French, and this is the English translation. Yes, it's definitely the English translation. But that's another interesting thing about the war. Like, what sets it up? What happened during the war, and then what about after the war? And the Cold War is so interesting and different from all the other wars that not necessarily came before it, but from, you know, it was different from the wars that are previously really in our recollection. And I think there are definitely elements about the Cold War that make it unique that I'd like to see if I can make fantasy equivalents, or what I can or can't make fantasy equivalents for. So, and this, what happens afterwards, is actually a very important part. The next one has to do with the Cold War as well. Stalin's American policy, but specifically the beginning and then during World War II. So this has to go from, you know, this is by William Taubman. Don't know his name, don't know who he is, don't know anything about his history. Who's a good history professor or person to read about? But this is definitely probably written from perspective of what we know, because the Russians, just like the Chinese, are very secretive about their records. I think I've heard recently about them opening more things up to historians, but who knows? They're secretive and authoritarian, so they have image issues. Let's just say that. And by issues, I mean they're very concerned about their image. Whereas America obviously is not concerned about its image as much. So, Stalin's American Policy. This is another Cold War-based book. And then going farther back, I bought this. This is definitely connected to either Crime and Punishment as well as some of the other stuff, because Russia is such a focus of the Cold War. We have the Russian Revolution this is actually volume 2, but this is from 1918 to 1921. So this goes from the Civil War to the consolidation of power by Stalin. No, Lenin was first. Lenin was before Stalin. Remember that, kids. So this goes through the beginnings of World War I. And what's Russia doing during that? I say the beginnings of World War I, but they're dealing with the war. What happened with the Tsars? How did communism rise? It's also connected to my reading of the Communist Manifesto in June. That is a bit of a background book. I don't know if I'll be able to read it during June, but we'll see. So those are the books that I've bought. I think there's probably more, but I think I've backed a lot of them away. Definitely check out any of these books. If I can find links to them on bookshop.org, I put them down below. Even if you don't, and those are all affiliate links, by the way, which means I get a small percentage of the profit if you buy. I believe it is. Even if you don't use the affiliate links, I would highly encourage you to use bookshop.org for any of your shopping needs for books, because they are a non-profit organization. They take their profits and they actually give them back to local bookstores, and they've been a huge help to local bookstores during the pandemic and other things. They're trying to be an Amazon, a not-for-profit Amazon alternative. Definitely anything you can do to get business away from Amazon is good. Just FYI. I'm not a big fan of them, and I'm not going to get on the soapbox here, but everybody have a great rest of your day. Enjoy your weather if you can. See you next time.